Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webcast on crafting a vision for creating generational wealth. During the presentation, please note that you are in chat-only mode. As the discussion unfolds, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box. And now, it is with great pleasure for me to introduce and hand things over to John Geigrich, a partner and coach at CEO Coaching International.
Awesome. Really excited to be here today with Paul and Brady. I'll get to introductions on them in just a minute. As you heard, I'm a partner and coach at CEO Coaching International. After 30 years in financial services, I retired, started coaching 4 years ago, and absolutely love it. CEO Coaching International, I would say, is the preeminent coaching firm for CEOs and entrepreneurs in the world. We've coached over 1,000 CEOs across the US and across the globe. Now, what makes us the preeminent firm? The results that we deliver. For clients of the firm for over 2 years, they grow revenue 2 times the national average. They grew EBITDA 5 times the national average. So the results speak for themselves. So really excited today to talk about crafting a vision for creating general wealth. So with me today, I've got Paul and Brady. We're going to do introductions a little differently than you likely see them in most webcasts. I like a model from John DeJulius called the Ford model, which doesn't stand for found on road dead, doesn't stand for first on race day. The F is for family, the O is for occupation, the R is for recreation, and the D is for dream. So we're going to start with Paul. So if you want to introduce yourself using that formula, Paul.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And I guess you're the king of the acronyms now, if you know all the Ford ones. And I believe in what John's saying. So for me, I have 3 children, been married 24 years here this month, and officially an empty nester as of a week ago. So now going on to that next chapter of my life. 25 plus years for me, occupation-wise, in financial services. The last 12 here at Carson as managing partner. Man, for recreation, I love to lots of things, hike, play golf. John and I think we share a passion also for bourbon and enjoying that. And a dream for me is I'm actually opening a social club right now, a place for people to connect. And one of my visions for it is we have a stage called the Infinite Stage, where we're going to be bringing in business leaders, community leaders, and philanthropic leaders to help people connect, build communities, what we call have mini vacations, and think infinitely about life. So a little bit about me, John.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Brady?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I used to use that Ford when I was a young advisor. I'd write it on the side of my paper, so I'd remember to ask the clients about those questions. So I've never quite had it reversed on me like that, so I appreciate it. Family, the thing that comes to mind, we have a 16-year-old daughter, just received her driver's license, and it's really this exercise in letting go, you know, really rooting for her independence, but also that fear that gets you about risk and her being out there on her own. So that's where we're at as a family right now, just rooting for her and praying for her at the same time. Recreation, I have retired from marathon running already. I've had a hip replacement in my 40s, so I'm on to things like cardio tennis and a little less impact things physically. But one thing I've really been proud of to bring more joy into my life this last year was joining an improv group and taking lessons at the local comedy place here in Omaha. So that's been awesome. And then dreams, I'm really in a sense of gratitude right now. I mean, my ultimate purpose is just growing and working with others. I love the opportunity to work with business owners because the canvas is unknown. And so just being able to guide that journey. And one of the other dreams I have is just continuing to host retreats where we're going out and doing physical activities, doing goal setting, and then kind of marrying those two. So it really imprints I think when you do the intellectual and physical. So those are some of the things about me.
All right, awesome. thanks both of you for doing that. I'd encourage everyone who listens to this, use that format for getting to know people better. I think it's fantastic. And I said at the beginning, I'm super excited to be here today. And part of the reason for that is that Carson Wealth, Paul and Brady have worked with several of my clients. And while we as a firm and hopefully me as an individual coach help our clients make big happen with their business, it's also important that they make big happen in every aspect of their life. And I couldn't recommend these two and the firm of Carson Wealth enough. So with that, Paul, I'll hand it over to you for the presentation.
Great. Thank you, John. Much appreciated, and appreciate your partnership, CEO coaching, and the approach there. So what we want to spend some time talking with you about today is, all right, I just want you to imagine as the CEO, right, how much time you spend in your business. What percentage of time do you think you spend strategizing about your own personal family situation? Your personal family situation related to your strategy, your wealth. You know, when I asked this question and Brady asked this question, it's almost sad would be the word I would use to talk about the results we get back. It's not even like a 5-to-1. It's, you know, people barely get 5% of their time allocated to this. And when we think about, you know, ways for people to approach this, is there's a lot of, you know, things that we think about that are important to them for their family. We recognize that most of you as CEOs and as entrepreneurs, your business value is the greatest asset you have on your balance sheet. But when we ask you what's your greatest asset in life, you always say your family. So aren't you building this business to continue to help your family and your family's wealth? Yet often people don't spend enough time actually getting to that and thinking through it. So we're going to share some tools and resources today, things you can implement in your life, in your business, with your family to help you make the right decisions. I think many of you have seen this, you know, 75% of CEOs would exit today if they were confident. I use the word confident there, that their financial security was assured. Let me just give you a case study here, for example. A year and a half ago, we were working with the CEO. We were working on an exit strategy. We came up with what we call net. So when we talk with people, what's the net number you need to get after a business sale? So this individual needed what we call net 40. They wanted 40 million as their example, right? Pick your own number that's important for you. So they went through the business transaction process. And guess what? They got offers all the way up to 70. 30 million above where they wanted. They said, great, this is it. My financial security is assured. It's the right thing to do for my family, my business, my employees. The day before closing, guess what happened? The buyer made a change and reduced it from 70 million to 67 million. What do you think happened with the CEO? They want to blow up the deal. I don't get them. Like, this was a bad move by the buyer. $3 million is a lot of money, but we reminded them that net 40 was their number. Even at 67, they're 27 million above their number they needed for financial security and all those things. Now, we found a way for them to go back after that 3 million, but they still ended up doing the deal because of the net 40. So what is your net 40? Do you have one? Do you really know what that is? You know, if Brady and I had to answer the question, you know, what's the average duration from when a client's going to sell? It's always 3 to 5 years. That is the standard stock answer. For those of you listening, if I asked you that question, when do you think you're going to exit your business? When are you going to move into your next chapter of life? You're probably going to say 3 to 5 years. But we want to imagine, you know, and Brady does a good job of talking about this, is what are you going to retire to? Not what are you retiring from, but what are you retiring to? And we think about memories and moments. We think about good things. Spending time with family is often the number one thing that gets cited. But I want to share with you, unfortunately, we don't see this happen in reality. And why is because business owners and CEO get so tied up and worked up on their business that they don't even allocate enough time to actually do the things that they need to do. I want you just to imagine for 1 second, I know this is morbid, but it's reality here. If you weren't on this earth, if you were leaving today and going home or going wherever you're going today, for some reason didn't make it home and you're not on this earth, if you looked yourself in the mirror, could you tell yourself, I feel 100% financially organized? I would assume most of you don't. So we have to think about, like all things, as you're getting coached by John and the other great coaches here at CEO Coaching International, they often talk about like what are outcomes that happen based on decisions, and then what are the benefits that come associated with that. Your own financial strategy you should be working on that in the same way with wealth strategists that are out there in there, like a Carson. Where are you going to have clarity on your next chapter, right? Every December, right, we all meet as business owners, just as I do, of building our strategy and game plan for the next year. Are you doing that every year in your wealth? Are you actually getting realistic valuations of your business? Do you have financial confidence for your family? If you're not here, they know what to do. Do you feel organized? And ultimately, one of the most interesting things we find is when those things happen, family communication actually improves. So we've shared what I call a winning strategy here. Is CEO Coaching is working with many of you around the globe. On the top left, you can see they're creating this enterprise value. They're helping you focus on building your team, the right employees and the right seats on the bus, driving your P&L, bringing in outsourced CFOs, all those types of things. And at the bottom, we're helping them think through, how does this also fit on their own personal balance sheet, from wealth management, wealth transfer. But imagine having not just the business coach who's doing great things, but a wealth coach who's helping align what you're doing for the majority of your time every day that matches to your most important asset, which is your family, your legacy, and what you're doing there. So Brady, maybe I think you can talk about how we help business owners think about their business value and approach there.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. To springboard off of that, it's that net number is what really stood out to me. So whatever your number is, if it's 7 million for your business exit, if it's 70, or if it's 700, I think at some point, the question that we see all business owners ask is, okay, now I've hit my number, but what's it all for? And how is that actually playing out in my life? Whereas if you think about a race car, it might have 500 horsepower, but is it all getting to the wheels? Like, how is this showing up in the communities that we're supporting, families, next venture, next mountain? And that's where we really help people zoom out, and that actually can make the value increase more when we're more purposeful about the why. There's a couple on this next slide. You'll see a couple of ways we do that. And this would be pre-business sale, thinking about a business continuity and succession plan. Even if you're going to sell to a PE or internal, thinking through what that looks like will help you actually effectuate it and make it more valuable when that time comes. Doing an informal valuation and growth plan. So what are the levers that we actually need to pull on? And John and the CEO Coaching International team does a great job there. We're also looking at what are some of the, I'll say, more soft skills that we might need. Do we need training for our employees? Do we need, do I need to think about how we bring other people into the business? And then also personal liquidity and tax planning, which Paul will touch on, is, hey, what are the details around this transaction? I have 70 million or whatever the number is in my head, but does that mean an employment agreement? What is the after tax? I was going to do some money gifting at sale. We're rolling some shares in. What is that calculation? Let's start thinking in terms of the details, not just that top line number. So the way we address that business continuity and succession plan, really this acts as a fail-safe first. So if something were to happen to you, you get hit by a meteorite. That's one of the CEO coaching clients told me that. He says he's going out, he's getting hit by a meteorite. He said, if that happens, who steps up? Who has the controls to help with the finances? If you have a spouse in the business, I often see a lot of business owners say, oh, it's this many millions of dollars, my family will be fine. But if any of you have actually gone through a grieving process and estate settlement, that can be really traumatic. And so thinking through who would actually step up, is there a board that steps in? Do we continue to run the business? Do we sell the business? Just going through those exercises makes the business even more bulletproof. It makes it less dependent on you, which makes the business more valuable. So that's a good thing just to have in place, and it starts helping you think about that next chapter. Informal valuation and growth plan. So this is about 60 questions that we take the owner through. How to maximize strategic, organizational, employee value. There's also a database in there of other businesses in that industry. It's not meant to be a formal evaluation, but it's really just meant to say, what is worth investing your time in over the next 3 to 5 years, maybe, that you can really make a difference. And you start to pair that with the continuity and succession plan, with the valuation plan, and then the levers that you're going to pull. Now you're really on track to what that next chapter looks like. I think Paul will touch on how that translates to the personal wealth.
Yeah, I think Brady, talk a little bit about, like, you put a lot of business owners looking to move to an exit, and they say that 3 to 5 year, they want some data behind it. So I think what you've built here is kind of cool. Yeah,
so it'll show the value gap. It says, hey, based on all your financials, your business, this business and this sector, whatever it is, professional, scientific, and technical services in this example, it says here's kind of the range, but here's the gap. Here's where you could actually make a difference out in the marketplace. And on this one, so it's employee value. We need to make our employees stronger, or it could just be organizational value. How are our processes and procedures, and where can we really make the biggest difference? So it gives your team something to shoot for as well. It also helps you think about what's your number need to be net of this.
Yeah, and I think Brady, maybe to share. So once you kind of have a good gauge on that, we like to throw that on your personal balance sheet and look at a lifetime. So starting today, and you live the next 50 years. And it's for those of you that were in Miami, as we both were at the summit, listening to Peter Diamandis talk about longevity and how much longer we may be living and what that looks like. We look at our responsibility of saying, hey, we're going to help you strategize through key decisions. One of the things you'll notice is, you work with a lot of people in the financial world. They call themselves financial advisors or wealth advisors. The reality is CEOs should be working with wealth strategists, people who are helping them think through strategies. So there's technology that now exists to help you contemplate what if decisions. Should I add more spending or not? Should I do more gifting to my college? Should I do more gifting to my children or grandchildren? Should I set up, next year, this pending estate tax exemption, sunsetting and getting lowered? Is now the right time for me to do a SLAT, or what, I'll have to use an acronym for John, right? A spousal lifetime access trust, or should I use an intentionally defective trust? Which one's the right one for me? My attorney maybe told me about it, but I need a strategist to help me do that. And we use not only the words, but show you visually what that impact, could be for your family. And what ultimately we find business owners, right, either before liquidity, or many of you we've worked with, like some of John's families that have had some form of exit, they get there. How do we help them manage a life after exit? And we always like to talk about what are the top 3 ways they can reduce taxes. Right? So a lot of them think about philanthropic giving as one way. You may have heard on the bottom about opportunity zones, but there's also some really unique investment offset strategies that can help you that CPAs don't always have access to, that a wealth strategist may, to help provide you advice. So right as you're getting that business value and you're looking at those what if decisions and then the impact in real dollars of what you can maybe save in taxes, it helps you ultimately get to that net number that helps you really think through your family and your family's wealth.
Yeah, what I think about here is, as business owners are expert pilots, but then become amateur parachutists. And what I mean by that is excellent at creating wealth, running a team, but then when it comes to discussing this with family, the family roles, how they might invite other advisors in to work with their children. That's a whole new territory, and that's okay. I mean, we all grow and learn. I think that's what we see is trying to maybe apply those same skills that they used in business to the family, and maybe seeing some incongruencies there. So we're here to help smooth some of that out through transition, so you can start operating with a more discerning family wealth lens as opposed to just a wealth creation lens. So when we start thinking about multi-generational wealth, you know, one of my clients told me, he said, yeah, when I was younger, it was a lot easier when I was broke because I didn't have any decisions to make. Business owner, they mortgaged the house to make his first buy into a business. And so all these conversations about wealth within the family, just there wasn't the time or even necessity for it. And often we have our clients say their parents never sat them down and spoke to wealth like this. So there just isn't the modeling and skills around how do we start communicating to this next generation. All of our clients say, hey, we don't want to mess them up. Warren Buffett's line of give your kids enough they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing rings true to a lot of our clients, but easier said than done. So it's taking a real multi-generational, multi-decade approach to this wealth. And especially as Paul said, as health and wellness, I mean, we could be doing this 140 years if the AI and health keep coming together like they are. And so the challenges can be just communication issues, you know, especially if you have an exit. What's this money mean to the family? I had a client where she said she took her family out to dinner and announced this big news of the exit, and they kind of shrugged and didn't understand how it affected them, and it was a little bit deflating. So thinking through some of that ahead of time to what's their viewpoint. If I'm asking them to come to some type of family meeting about wealth or something like that, or about their roles in the family, our younger advisors on our team, we asked them, we said, if you were invited to a meeting like that from your parents, what would you say? And they said, oh crap, why am I getting called into this meeting? So just there's some things that we can do along the way to help make those conversations smoother. And the third generation curse, we call this short sleeves to short sleeves, meaning, hey, the first generation's out there breaking their back, earning the money, they're just wearing t-shirts. And then the second generation gets a little better well-heeled and has the cufflinks. They came from money, but now they've atrophied on those skills to protect the wealth, and then end up squandering the wealth, and now we're back to t-shirts. So that's kind of the third generation curse. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that, but that's really that's the challenge that we're overcoming. And then potential tax issues, as Paul said, maybe not all of the people on this call are in the exemption is 13.6 million a piece. So between you and your spouse, that's $27 million of the exemption that may go down, but that could go down to 7 million each. So really just understanding if that is even a fit for you. If you go just tell an attorney that you think you need that, they'll probably go ahead and say you do need it and build it. But really just taking a step back and saying, hey, with the assets that I have, is this even applicable to me? So that way you're not spending money on something that's unnecessary for your situation. So selecting your team, I really think when you're talking about your family, it's good to have a central, really confidential place to go. It doesn't mean that advisor is maybe being the therapist or in every meeting, but really thinking about centralizing those conversations. So if you do have to bring in some cases, somebody from the church, a pastor, to help facilitate family communications, or if you want to bring in an advisor because you have somebody that's one of your kids is really great and wants to learn more about private equity and investing, being able to pair them with resources that are closer to their age and life stage is really huge, and our clients love that. Next slide. Then creating the shared values with family. This is where we really get the kind of the tears going in some of the meetings. It's goal planning, but it's doing it separately and then bringing it together. And the magic that happens when you start to see what your children's longer term goals are, even them trying to articulate it, that helps you weave in how you can support them better than it just being financial. So really just doing goal setting together, taking the foundation, the values that put you to where you're at, and then also weaving in the new generation's values and interlocking those, which is synergetic in my opinion. the 1 + 1 creates 3, creating that shared legacy. And I think of legacy like now, not necessarily when we're gone and not a library. Legacy, I think, is writing your own obituary. If you've done a blueprinting process, write your own obituary, not because you're thinking about the morbidity around it, because it's more about, hey, if that's how I want people to talk about me when I'm gone, then what do I need to do today to embrace those and live those values? So we go through a process like there, and that makes the family meeting or workshop. Family meeting can be a little daunting, is a workshop where we're doing assessments, really just to get people talking about awareness about themselves, a little bit of goal setting, understanding some best case stories and maybe some places where families failed, and just talking about those as a group and leaving the money out of it. I think people start too quickly with the money talk. Really just get used to talking as a family, working as a team, and that really creates a foundation moving forward. So family meeting timeline, happy to share some of this if people want to say, well, how do we get through a process like this? It really is just an assessment. We do some one-on-one sessions and then have the meetings. And then, as I talked about, family retreats, let's go somewhere like if it's mountains that brings your family closer together, if it's beach, start to weave in those things. But you have to do some of this work up front. Just putting that on the calendar and going to do that, it's going to feel more like a vacation. Have a little of an intention around it. And this might take a couple of years to get it right. But just knowing that this is why we're having this conversation now, to start planting these seeds for you and your family to have really productive and meaningful conversations.
Yeah, and Brady, I think I would add, like, as you've helped these families and do this, like each family goes at a different pace. So some families love this, they want to do family meetings and right away, and others are they want to move slowly through it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You got to find out what's the right pace, for your family. One thing I would like to share with everyone, one of my passions, that I share is, like, when I was talking about my infinite stage concept earlier, I'm chair of a foundation called the Dreamweaver Foundation, and we do last wishes for the impoverished elderly, that have a, life-limiting illness. So it's basically like make a wish, but reversed. And, while it's beautiful, the number one thing we've learned is actually loneliness in the senior community. And what we've also found is at their end of life, families are trying to repair disconnect they have. And it's been really interesting to observe this because, and I'll call my day job in helping families strategize their wealth, they often avoid talking to their families or doing a wealth plan or putting this together. And then later in life, they're trying to make up for what I call lost time. I'm not sure if he spoke at this, he didn't speak at this year, might have been a couple of years ago. I saw him speak recently. If you know Daniel Pink, the author, he talks about the power of regret. And people, in the power of regret, it's either I wish I did something or I wish I wouldn't have done something. And hands down, it's people wish they would have done something. Not that they did something and made a mistake. Well, yes, that was regretful. They actually show more regret when they didn't do something they know they should have done. And that's actually based on that data Daniel shared with us. What we've learned is how do you help families actually do some of this stuff in a simplistic way? So we've actually generated, have you actually put together a love letter to your family where it's just simple to the point of here's who you turn to? I give the example of, if something happened to you, your first call's to your family. Your second call is to your spirituality, religion, faith, what that may be. Your third call, who's your third call? Who's your trusted friend? Who's your trusted confidant? And a lot of times I'll tell you, Brady, I know it's us because we know where everything is. We know what's happened. We've built their goals, values, and beliefs, and we've already been in communication with their children. And so if we can help them memorialize it in a way through a financial letter, or not a financial letter, a love letter through this protection of showing what they want, what they believe in. I know it seems, maybe strange, or I'll use the word fluffy. I can also tell you the sense of weight off of people's shoulders after going through this exercise, that their family feels loved, protected, and by the way, if I wasn't on this earth, knowing my family had something to look at. And so it's a simple process really of putting the letter together, of making sure if something happened, we call it break the glass, put together a short form, what wishes or aspirations you have. And I can tell you, if you're not on this earth and you're looking in and watching your family, you don't want to see them struggle. You want to know that you did those little things during your lifetime to make their life easier. The ironic part is you do this for your business. You do it all day long. You get coached on doing this for this business, but how many of you actually do this in your own personal life as part of your wealth strategy and approach? And Brady, I think you hit on this earlier, right? One of your favorites here.
Yeah, same thing. Just, I think a lot of, I mean, all of us, we hope that our children have better lives than we did, and that we're supporting that. But we also know the grit, the resilience. I mean, I think those are a lot of the values and skills and lessons that we look back on and are most proud of. So we always think of ways like, how do we engineer those? And I think it just takes some intention.
Yeah. Like examples.
Yeah, and one way, just I always like this one, a donor advised fund. If you're not familiar, it's a nice tool. If you want to make a donation to a nonprofit, you can put it in your donor advised fund. You get the tax break in the current year. But if you wanted a bunch, like, hey, I want to put a bunch in this year, I get the tax break now, and then we can decide as we go, anytime over the next 10 years, how you dole that out. But one thing, so really easy to set up. I mean, your advisor, Fidelity, us, anybody could set that up for you. But having a tool to start the family conversation. So maybe at Thanksgiving, you say, okay, everybody's gonna give out, it could be $100, it could be $10,000. Pick a nonprofit and then share that at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Really small, easy exercise that brings families together. You're not talking about any conflict or anything in between the families. We're talking about what we're doing out in the community as a family, and everybody's getting their own say as how we do that.
Yeah, and I think, right, it's a financial thing, right? So as we're helping prepare owners for exits, right, Brady, this is a technique, so quantitatively, hey, how many thousands or millions should we put in donor vehicle? There's some tax benefits to go with it, but we like to align the tax benefits with the intent, right? And the intent is then often a great way to do this. And John's aware, like, as we've done this with some of his families, like, how do we think through this in a very diligent way to approach it? So if you want from us, and maybe we'll see what questions have come in through the chat here, questions John had, is we can help many of you as CEOs like that informal valuation and driver report. I'll put our contact information is there. If you need assistance on, I'll call liquidity planning or saving, or what is your net 40 number? What does that mean for you? Or if you want a copy of this next generation protection letter, we're happy to share that with all of you. Maybe next, if John wants to hop back on here, open it up for what maybe questions are coming in through the community. Or I will tell you, if you don't know John Geigrich, and I had the pleasure of being in, where's that? No, Napa earlier this year, beautiful place. John asked some of the best questions I've ever seen. You're not going to get small talk. I think you keep saying we're going to have big talk questions when you come from John.
No, I don't like small talk. I do have some questions for you, and I got a couple in from the chat also. But listening to you, and you guys did a great job, so thanks for that. I reflected way back, I was in the M&A group at SunTrust, and we represented the Robbie family in the sale of the Miami Dolphins to Wayne Huizenga. First minority interest, and then eventually the whole team, which was 100% driven by no estate tax planning. And so the family inherited the Dolphins, and they also inherited a big tax bill that the only way they were going to pay it was by selling the team. So just one great example of the downside of not doing planning. One of the other things that really resonated with me was talking about the family meetings and governance. I worked with a 5th generation family business. They had set up great governance. They had consistent family meetings. 5th generation, you were talking about the 3rd generation curse, so they've obviously done a lot of things right. But the business had been flat at about $1 billion in revenue for 10 years. And so we refreshed the vision, the mission, the strategy, because the 5th generation really wanted to leave a better company to the 6th generation. We set out our vision and beat it in 2 years. And so the business is now doing over $1.5 billion. So couldn't emphasize enough the importance of having those meetings and making sure everyone's aligned on the vision for the family, not just for the business. So number one question is, and I love saying, what's the number one thing? What's the number one mistake you see entrepreneurs, CEOs making?
Simple. They don't allocate the time, John. They just don't. They get, so I hate the word busy. They don't allocate the time. They wake up, they live, breathe their business, and they run home and want to be, I'll call, present with their family, which is great. And then they don't get to this. And the best entrepreneurs we see, they actually carve out a time allocation to do this of, hey, how much time, per week or per month do I want to allocate it? And it can be in short tidbits, but they've dedicated it. It's part of their life plan that this is a focus area for them.
Awesome. Brady, do you have a different number one or maybe a close number two?
It's similar, maybe it's just more specific under that, but especially if you're thinking about exit, is really going through a mock due diligence. Like, what does that actually look like? Like, what are the details? What would you want your employment agreement to look like? In a perfect world, would you want to own shares of a new company? Like, really thinking through those, because I think if you don't, then you allow the buyer to start setting those terms for you, and then you start like negotiating off of those terms. So go ahead and set your terms now. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to be exactly that, but start the negotiation clear in your head with what's ideal, and then that prepares you better to go into negotiations, and so things don't fall apart at the last minute when something is off because of it's off your value set.
Yeah. And if I can quickly, John, the thing you do there, Brady, I think is so interesting is, I think we've all heard of this business called Chick-fil-A, small business, right, throughout the country. What do we know Chick-fil-A? They're closed on Sundays. That's one of their principles, and that's something that's important to them. So we'll actually ask you as a business owner and as a family, what are your closed on Sundays? What are those things that are your principles and values that are important to you so you understand them? And by the way, in getting to an exit, you need to know what those are, because you're going to get to an exit faster if you're clear on what those are.
Great point. And I like to say, what is required, what is desired for my clients. And Paul, one of my clients that is a client of Carson Wealth now, his desired was to leave the business the day it sold. His required was some short period of time, under a year, to stay. And we were able to get him not only the valuation that he wanted, in fact, in excess of where we thought it would be, but he was able to leave the next day also. So that was fantastic. So outside of time, what is the number one obstacle for people putting in this strategy in place?
Two things I would say. One is they think, we call it break the glass. They think whatever they created years ago is still relevant now, right? So their plan, their trust, their will, their healthcare power of attorney. John, we just saw one recently where it was all their wealth as part of their legal plan was going to 2 spouses ago, not one, right? Like, so just don't assume that you've done something that makes that happen. 2, we call, like, if you ever watch a movie or read a good book, you really fall in love with a character, and then later in the movie you fall in love with a new character that becomes super important to the story of the book or the movie. No different. Sometimes people start working with a financial professional or CPA as they first start their business. It's okay if you graduate to someone else that helps you in this next level of wealth. It's okay. They should actually understand. So I think getting out of their comfort zone, oh, I've been with Steve or Susie or whoever for all these years, they've got to let that go and realize they need someone else to help them on this next chapter of life's journey.
Awesome. Brady, what about you for hurdles that get in the way after people say, yes, I want to do it, hurdles other than time in getting it done?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just the look in the mirror. I think about spending. So we never ask people to do a budget because it's, especially at this time, it's probably the most successful they've ever been. Sometimes if you make your expenses and your needs high enough, that just drives you to figure out how to make more revenue and wealth creation. Kind of like if you're a runner, like you can pretty much eat what you want if you're marathon training. So we look at, like, every once in a while, I think it's worthwhile to say, like, where is the money going? How does that align with my values? You know, what am I putting in my body? I think about it on nutrition. So really just slowing down and putting pen to paper, how much expenses are running through the business, these types of things that haven't really been necessary because you've been so successful and you know your EBITDA is going up every year. I think it's worthwhile to just slow down every once in a while and put pen to paper as to where everything's going on the personal side.
Okay, awesome. Question from the chat. What is the number one piece of advice that you would give to people who are listening now that they can take action on today?
Yeah, I would say for number one is, do they actually, in their heart, right? Just asking that mirror question I said earlier, John, of they look themselves in the mirror, do they really feel financially organized? And if they don't, what's deficient and what do they need to have happen? And we say, you're not going to build a huge list. What are those two things? Like, just what are your two top priorities that need to have that happen? One area to go with that is, if right now, John, you weren't here and your spouse or family, you have everything in one location. You have a digital vault, like just even that simple. Like if you don't have a digital vault, we call it the junk drawer. How many people have your junk drawer, your Gmail folder that your family would have to go sort through? Could you even just collaborate everything into one digital vault? I'm going to tell you, the peace of mind you get just of having that would be a great thing you could do from here.
Yeah, I'll pivot a bit from the family communications that we talked about. I'd say having one proactive tax meeting a year, and it's probably not with your CPA. CPAs get busy, they're looking backwards. If you give them something very specific, they'll tell you everything you need to know. But I'd say somebody that knows your whole situation, have a proactive tax meeting. Hey, we are looking forward, and not just at the end of the year, what we're going to spend and what we can get by the end of the year for deductions. It's really looking out long term. What's my proactive tax strategy, long term and short term?
I have a client of mine who said this to me. He goes, I figured out that most great CPAs are not good tax strategists. Either they're great at doing the returns and getting all the information in, or they're great at strategy. So Brady, I think that's a fantastic point. I will say, on a personal note, while he didn't have assets anywhere close to qualifying for Carson Wealth, when my father-in-law died, graduated from West Point 55, served in the Army for 30 years. But when he passed away, there was a briefcase that he had showed me beforehand that had a manila folder for every single thing, including his DD 214, that we would need. So as you're going through that grief, it was just clear. This is step one, this is step two, this is step three. So that organization at least really helped us get through that moment. You guys mentioned before current estate tax sunsetting the end of 2025. What would you encourage people to be thinking about, as that may seem far off now, but time goes by faster and faster every day, and before you know it, it'll be here. So what advice would you give them to start thinking about that?
Sure.
I think we're definitely at the deadline of trying to understand if it applies to you or not. I think we're there, because to set it up, you might have to make gifts in 2 different years, maybe this year and next year, if we're going to do it correctly. Where, so say you're doing reciprocal slats, getting spousal lifetime access trust, as Paul mentioned earlier, and we have to do those in different years. So it's going to take some time to execute properly. So I would say at least talk to somebody trusted that you can understand if it applies to you or not.
Okay.
Yeah. I think talk to someone trusted, but also don't do something just to do something to feel pressure. I will tell you, we're seeing lots of law firms send out, I don't want to call them scare tactics or notifications, but hey, you better do this. We're not going to have time for you next year. It's a little bit of BS. Like they're going to have time for you. 2 numbers you need. What is your true net worth? And what have you given so far? What amount have you hit up to your exemption? If you have at least those 2 numbers, then we can start to talk through the strategy of where you're going and what would make sense or not there.
And then at
Okay.
least you know, so when you get those solicitations, you can say, I've looked at it, I'm good, thank you.
All right, awesome. Paul, Brady, this has been fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to put on the show today. A lot of great content, really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. We appreciate it as well. So thank you, CEO Coaching.
All right, I hope everybody has an awesome rest of the week.
You too. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.